Nobody can tell you what to do. They can only give you the underpinning knowledge and, I suppose, the benefit of their experiences. It's up to you to gauge what you've got and how you'll put it into practice. So don't look for any direct, easy fixes. Look for principles that you can bank on, that you can use with thought later on to make your coaching philosophy and your coaching processes so much more relevant. There's an old saying that knowledge is merely a tool, and like all other tools, it depends for its effect on the user. The very first lecture we've got, or presentation we've got, is Michael Hagan. Michael's going to talk about communication, and I think, like everything else, when it comes to coaching, a coach has to be a good manager, has to be a good teacher, but above all has to be a tremendously good communicator. And so we're lucky then to have a person of Michael's ability. Michael has been either head coach or assistant coach for Queensland, Canberra, the Newcastle Knights, where he's a life member, and also Parramatta. He's won 3 premierships and played altogether in the NRL, or the old ARL, 191 first class or first grade games. So we've got then a person who has had success on the field, in the stands, in the dressing room, and I know that with that success we should be able to get a lot from him as to how best to instruct our players and get the best from them. So I'd like you to welcome Michael Hagan.
Thanks, Peter. Nice to see you all bright and early. Pleased on first cab off the rank. Just to give you a bit of history, I guess I did my level 2 coaching course, I think it was at Armidale back in about 1996. I think I participated in that camp with people like, I think Steve Roach might have done his level 2 around that time with me. I think Paul Conlon was another member of that group. And just to paint the picture for you today, I know you're going to have a number of presenters between today and tomorrow. I don't have in my possession a whole heap of PowerPoint slides or overheads, so we'll just try and work through some issues as we go. And just to remind Peter Corcoran, thanks for the introduction, by the way, but just to put it into context as to where Peter sits now versus where he sat back in that 1996 level 2 camp. It was actually a week of coach education lectures, so it was like morning, afternoon, and you actually had about 300 or 400 kids, I guess, would actually come to the camp. So you would get to practice on these unsuspecting 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, I think, around that, maybe 16-year-olds. And in conjunction with the work you had to do, the notes we had to take, the questions we need to answer, also involved a very, very strict social attitude to the week. So it was quite a hectic week from my memory. It was work all day, out in the sun, coach the kids, have a few beers of a night, most nights. So you're talking Steve Roach, those type of characters back then. So it was a pretty good introduction to coaching, I guess. And just to finish off, our last session as coaches, I think it was about day 6 of 6 days of all day, every day and coach education. Corco hit us with 120 overheads on motivation at the end. Well, that was just a bit too much for us to handle back then. So I'll go without the overheads. We'll try and get some of the issues sorted out as we go. I guess just for your information at the moment as to where I sit in the game or involvement I have in the game, and I spoke to Timmy Sheens briefly before about, and I admire the fact that Tim and Brian Smith and Wayne Bennett have now coached in the order of 600 games each, I guess. To put that into context, I think I did 205 in a first grade environment. So I take my hat off to those men that can knock out 600. It takes a bit of sorting out. But I guess my career finished about 2008 at Parramatta. And I guess to give you some reasons for that, I actually had my family in Newcastle. I was on the freeway 2 or 3 times a week, going backwards and forwards to Parramatta. So by the end, I became a very cranky, disenchanted rugby league coach. So my advice is, if you're in a good headspace and you enjoy it and you want to be involved, it's a great profession to take on board and have a go at. Or if you aspire to be involved at a good level, you certainly need to have the right energy and motivation to be able to continue doing it consistently, week after week, year after year. So my involvement from that time has probably been one of assisting in a couple of areas. David Furner, who I would have had some involvement with when I coached at the Raiders. My first coaching gig was as a second grade coach in Canberra back in 1998. So that was my first introduction to coaching. Mal Meninga was the head coach back then. So ironically now, Mal Meninga is the head coach for Queensland, and I'm giving Mal a hand with the Queensland team. So those relationships and the tentacles in our game is probably the thing that over time you begin to realise that you've had a really good involvement in the game. You get to meet and talk to a number of very good people that have coached or played in the game over a long time. David Furner was probably at the end of his first grade career back then. He, I think, went to England to finish his career at Wigan. He came back and I guess went through an apprenticeship at Canberra, has been a second grade coach himself. I think it was an assistant coach down there when I think maybe Matty Elliott was in charge, Neil Henry. So my involvement in the last couple of years has centred around being very much in the background in the game, and David Furner and I sort of hit up a pretty good friendship when I started back in Canberra back then. So I'm actually working behind the scenes for David Furner, very much on analysis of how his team plays every week in the NRL, and then also looking at the opposition that they play each week. So I guess part of today is about recognising where you sit in the game and understanding what your strengths are, and devoting your time and energy to those areas that you think you can add some value in. So that's part of the game that I really enjoy. It means I'm not involved in the day-to-day management or coaching of players, which is time consuming, takes a fair bit of energy, can be frustrating at different times, and I'm sure there's any number of examples in this room that we could talk about. And if you have some questions or examples you want to share, happy to talk about them. And I guess the other part of my involvement at the moment is with Mal Meninga and the Queensland team. So to give you some background to how that came about, Mal, I think he rang me about this time last year, to be honest. I think Neil Henry resigned as the assistant coach with Queensland, had done a great job for 3 years or 4 years with Queensland. And obviously they've got a tremendous footy team. They've got a great nucleus of players that are able to help run the team, which makes life easier as a footy coach. But Mal sort of said, listen, Hags, I'm a bigger picture sort of guy. I've put this program together, but I need someone to give me a hand with the analysis and detail on what we do each week when we come up against New South Wales. So again, I've probably recognised for myself that while I got myself into a head coaching position, not really sure if that's where I should have got myself to, and I think I'm certainly more comfortable in an assisting role. So there's probably some people in the room that think, well, I'm an assistant coach, I'm a skills coach, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. Some aspire and go on to be head coaches, and that's, obviously a genuine goal for a lot of people. But I guess the other part of today is a little bit about recognising what your strengths are and what your talents are and what you bring to the table, because that's, I guess, where the game's headed now and where it's developed with much better resources and coaching staffs now that have increased. There are certain roles that need to be performed and done well to support or complement the head coach. So that's, I guess, something that I've probably realised or recognised a bit in the last 12 months or 2 years. The other thing that I've probably come across in the last 12 months, and something that on review and thinking about communication and how you deal with certain staff, how you deal with players, some players in terms of the elite player, the players that have got slightly different personalities to maybe how you would go about things or how you get on with your day-to-day business. I've actually stumbled upon a particular concept or a tool in the last, say, 12 months in a business coaching environment where I probably haven't given enough understanding or recognition to understanding a couple of different components apart from a player's personality, which again takes time to understand. And I guess part of the communication process for everybody, and for me, if I look at the time I've spent in the game, you know, sometimes communication or in coaching is about our knowledge and about how much we know. And I think that's, you know, that's probably given the people in the room, that's nearly a given, that we've got certain understanding, certain knowledge of the game, certain technical ability. So that's